Hi, welcome back to the Najdorf. In this chapter, we're going to look at the sixth move, bishop c4. The Najdorf arising after moves e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, and now the move bishop c4. Bishop c4 is one of the traditional main moves against the Najdorf. It's reasonably popular at all levels. It's not experiencing quite a fashion wave at the highest level lately. I feel always it is a very risky system for white. White's bishop is aiming at the e6 square, which is on one hand putting some pressure, but on the other hand, potentially the bishop, as it usually lands on b3 or even sometimes a2, is a little bit out of play, and white takes a certain amount of responsibility. And I feel usually from the games that I have seen, if black has his move order right, and if he plays accurately the initial phase of the opening, then in the long run, black can easily take over the initiative. But as I mentioned, it's very important to get the move order right. So let's look at that. We start with move e6, and there is no point in starting with b5. It just allows the extra option of bishop at d5, which is a little bit unpleasant. So you start with d6, and now white has a lot of different plans. Robert James Fisher had with white a few good games after setups with a3 and a4. He would drop the bishop to a2, but Robert James Fisher had good results and good games also with the first move b3. So this is not a measure of how correct or sound the system is. He just was a tremendous player. Besides these plans with a3, a4, there are a lot of other plans. In fact, these plans are not even the main ones. Perhaps the main plans start after move bishop b3. Then white has different ideas. He can try castling queenside by moving the bishop out to e3 or g5 and the queen out to f3 or d2, then castle long. And he also has short castle ideas as well. We should look just at all the moves one by one. I believe there are many moves, but essentially none of them are all too dangerous. The thing with long castle plans, for example, is that white spends usually 2 tempi with his light square bishop, and that gives us enough time for counterplay. So it is a little bit risky for white. But let's look at concrete variations. First of all, move 7 bishop g5. It is not a very good move. White will also play bishop g5 on move 6 and after e6 bishop c4, but this just doesn't work. We'll go bishop e7 and it will likely transpose. We will study this setup under bishop b3, b5, and now bishop g5 move order. This is a little bit more common and a little bit more to the point. Same story with bishop e3. It's an okay move, but after b5, bishop b3, we transpose to bishop b3, b5, bishop e3. Now let's look at the move a3. Yeah, it's pretty slow, and white can play this way, but it's not very threatening. We call bishop e7, castle, we develop. Bishop a2. By the way, do pay attention to the move orders. After a3, we do play bishop e7, but we don't always play bishop e7 first. So pay attention to that. Castle, bishop a2, b5. Yeah, white hasn't achieved too much, having brought his bishop to a2. After f4, bishop b7, f5, we can hit with e5. Then after knight e2, knight b7, white's a little bit slow with his development. His pawn on e4 is already hanging, and after knight g3, we have a very strong idea, a5. We want to push b4. Again, the e4 pawn is in trouble, and knight takes b5, as we know, fails to queen b6 trick. Besides a5, also rook c8 takes c3 is a good idea. So overall, this is not working quite well. And if white doesn't push for f4, f5, then it is not clear at all what bishop on a2 is doing. And besides a3, white can also play a4. Also not all too dangerous to go bishop e7, castle, bishop e3, and here knight c6. Once white has stopped b5, it is sensible to develop knight to c6, and here, well, white has a few options, but overall black is fine. So, for example, after f4, we have a strong move d5. Now, especially these positions after ED, they are always all right for black, but especially here with the pawn on, first of all, A4, weakening the B4 square, secondly, F4, weakening a bunch of squares, here E4 and G4. In particularly in this position, black is doing very, very well, and the isolated pawn on D5 is not that weak, and after, for example, bishop B3, the bishop now is badly placed, and after bishop to D3, I mean, there are also concrete issues with knight G4. Just a very good version of these positions for black, so F4 is not good. King H1 is better to be a little bit more flexible. And here, black has a serious choice, lots of options. Even here, it's possible to go D5. Again, this isolated pawn is really not a big deal. It's well protected, and if white chooses to keep the bishop on B3, then the bishop is potentially quite bad. And if not, then the D5 pawn is not under pressure. So D5 certainly good enough. Bishop D7 is something I would not recommend, because now white does get F4, F5, and now we closed the D file for D5. So besides D5, I think Queen C7 is very good. Now Queen 2. And here we have a lot of options. We can play now Bishop D7. We got this move Bishop Queen C7 in extra. We can also play Knight B4 or Knight E5. All have their own merits. But the easiest from point of view of solving opening problems is Knight takes E4, Knight E4, D5. It's a thematic, simplifying a tactic common in various openings, but especially in the Bishop C4 Knight off, we see it occur sometimes. Now we win back the pawn, and after Knight C6, Queen C6, Bishop B5, we have Queen C7. Very important. AB, obviously, after AB would lose material, so rook will be hanging. After Queen C7, white has to drop one of the pieces back, and we win back the other piece. D4, Bishop E4, and after Bishop D7, Bishop C6, black is very comfortable. We have just no weaknesses in the position, just very comfortable, a good position. Same as after 13 Bishop D3. Here we also take and play Bishop D7. Again, very comfortable, equal position. That is just one of the ways of solving problems. I mean, 10 D5 is also perfectly fine. The only thing to avoid is Bishop D7, F4, and white gets F5 and some small pressure. And that is for A4. After castle, we push B5. Now after Bishop B3, we transpose to Bishop B3, B5 short castle line, and Bishop D3 is an extra option. It's not completely pointless. Of course, white lost the tempo, but he wants to perhaps target our queenside pawns that he might claim to have provoked a little early. But it's not a big deal. We go Bishop E7, A4, B4, Knight A2, now E5, Knight F3, Knight C6, in time to defend the B4 pawn. In general, as I repeatedly mentioned, there is a sense of justice or logic, you could say, when it comes to chess openings. So if white loses a tempo early on in the opening, then as a rule we have a good position if we follow it up correctly. And here with E5, Knight C6 idea, we solve our problem with the B4 pawn, and white's knights are not overly impressive. Another important thing to be aware of is that 7G4 is premature. We have B5, and after Bishop B3, B4, we hit the E4 pawn. That is important. If white had the time to push our knight back with G5, he would have quite some initiative. So that is a nuance. And that is also why after 7 Bishop B3, which is the main move, why here we go for B5. And this is very important because I believe it is a very common inaccuracy or actually mistake to go Bishop E7 here. And I think I myself, in some quick games, in some bullet games, occasionally misstep with Bishop E7, because you think what could be more natural, just develop the bishop, then castle, and then see what happens. But it's not quite accurate. After Bishop E7, white has a very strong idea of G4, G5, and he gets pretty good initiative going. So we should just avoid it with B5 first. Very important against Bishop B3 to play B5, not Bishop E7. Now G4 will be met by B4, that's the whole point, and then the E4 pawn will fall. Here white has a variety of plans, so you can castle short. It is the old main line, but I'm not quite impressed with it, to be honest. Never really feared. Well, there are some traps, obviously, so we should be aware of that. We should start here with bishop e7, and now white plays queen f3. F4 is also played, but it's not very good. Castle, and now if f5, we have b4 hitting the knight first. Common idea to hit the knight before pushing e5. Now the weakness of this square doesn't play much role. Knight e2 and now bishop b7, followed by development. Knights are very far away from the d5 square. Position is very good. e4 pawn is also in a great deal of trouble. 10 e5 is the most direct approach. After d, f, knight of d7, it looks a little bit scary. Let's say a jump like queen h5, but there are really various ways to get a good position here. I like really a knight c6, very nice, cute idea, trading this active knight. With knight c6, we have queen b6 check. Obviously, that's the point. A nice little tactic. Bishop 3, queen c6. If rook f3, we go bishop b7, and the queen and the rook cannot do much damage. White cannot switch to the h file because of the mate, and the knight on c3 and bishop on b3 in particular this bishop on b3 is out of play, and that is a theme in this variation in general. White often regrets having played the whole system, as the bishop on b3 is potentially a terrible piece. Like in this case, the bishop is really very miserable on b3. 12 bishop f4 is also a move. Now we play knight c5, solidifying our e6 pawn, and next we want to develop with bishop b7, knight c6. Nothing to worry about. Again, bishop on b3, terrible piece in this particular situation. 12 bishop e3 is it's actually a bluff, so we should not fear any ghosts. Take on e5. Queen h5, and now there are various options here that are okay for black. I like queen c7, falling for knight takes b5, which is the only way for white to try and justify his position. Now we take a knight b5 and we lose the e5 pawn, and with that we lost one pawn. We had one pawn extra, now we give two back. But after queen c6, queen e5, bishop b7, the positional landscape changes a lot. White has no more attacking prospects. We have strong control over the long diagonal. The knight on b5 is, of course, offside quite a bit. And after rook f2, we go knight d7, another tempo move. Queen h5, knight c5, knight d4. We have queen e4, centralizing the queen. And now we can, at any moment, take the b3 bishop. And what's remarkable is that our two central pawns are much more relevant than white's three queenside pawns. These queenside pawns not going anywhere. Black has just black actually has a serious advantage in this position, contrary to what a quick pawn count would tell you. So life not all about pawns. Yeah, we have looked at this as well. Yes, we looked at all of 9 f4. And now time to look at 9 queen f3. Now the I'm not a massive chess historian, but I would imagine the reason this has become a mainline at some point of bishop c4 system is that white was very attracted to the idea that bishop b7, which is the most natural move, trying to neutralize the queen, is going to be met by bishop takes e6. I'm not even going to make this move. Somehow I feel bad executing bad moves on the board. Although, yeah, I shouldn't. Bishop b7. It is bad because of bishop takes e6. A very important resource that white has, and we should never blunder it. It's a common idea in bishop c4 systems. Basically, a common mistake black can make is to allow this kind of sacrifice after f knight e6. White already has 2 pawns, and he will win the third pawn and has strong attack. And already enough material for the piece. 3 pawns is usually enough. But we should not fall for it, and there are 2 ways of countering the threat of e5, as the queen is threatening the a8 rook. Black can play queen to c7, ready to meet e5 with bishop b7, or queen to b6, and also ready to meet e5 with bishop b7. Both are perfectly fine, But I had to choose one, so I chose queen b6. Now bishop g5 is an interesting idea. The interesting thing about it is that d4 knight is not hanging because of e5. So we should not fall for it. But if we just castle, then white hasn't achieved much. After rook a1, knight b7, yeah, we intend knight c5, and we have a very comfortable position here. And bishop g5, basically just the trick is just that we shouldn't take the knight on d4. Bishop e3 is the main move instead. Now white forces us to make one more move, as knight takes e6 is a threat. Queen b7, we fine chatted our queen, but it's pretty good. White hasn't achieved much also with his queen here. Bishop on b3 is constantly a problem in this system, staring into this e6 pawn, and doesn't have much purpose. Queen g3 is how white plays. a3 will just lose time, so white plays queen g3. Now we go b4 and knight to a4, and here we play knight b7. It's also possible to castle first, but taking on g7 is not good for white, so we can do knight b7 first, quite flexible. After queen g7 we go rook g8, queen h6, knight to g4. There is always the knight df6 idea if needed. After, for example, queen f4, we have knight df6, threatening e5, forking these two pieces, queen on f4 and knight on d4. And after queen f3 we can grab the bishop, and after knight e3, queen e3, take the e4 pawn, and we have a good position. We have dark squared bishop, and white's knight on a4 is out of play. Position is complex, but good for black. Instead of queen g7, f3 is the main move, protecting the e4 pawn. Now we should already castle, and this is a very comfortable position for black. I believe we want to play knight to e5 and develop the bishop to d7. Knight sometimes can go to g6 if it needs to go somewhere at all, though it doesn't have to. The main thing about this position is that white still has this problem. Bishop on b3, strange knight on a4, and he hasn't achieved much on the king side. These pawns e4, f3, they are quite timid. So all in all, black just comfortable. We want to play knight d5, bishop d7, the rook to c8, and so on. So for example, rook a1 or rook f1. I look at both. There are some differences though, I have to say. So after rook a1, it's possible to play king h8 or rook b8 first, but it's fine also to allow this knight b6 tactic here. If I take, there is knight to f5 and queen and the mate is hanging, but we don't have to comply. Yeah, we can also play knight h5, but here it's a bit tricky. Knight h5, queen to e1, queen b6, knight e6, a very messy position. White wins back some material. It's very complex. Instead, we can just play rook b8 simply. Knight c8, take with the queen. And we have given up the bishop for the knight, but it doesn't really matter much. White still has the same problem with the bishop. We still have our usual Sicilian play with knight to c4. We want to push a5, and yeah, just a comfortable position. Again, nothing bothering us on the king side. After rook f1, it's a similar story. After knight e5, if white plays knight b6, here we have an even better version. Now after knight h5, queen e1, queen b6, knight e6, queen b8, knight f8, bishop f8, compared to complications after rook ad1. With rook missing from f1, white doesn't have g4, g5 push. So that's why after knight b6, we can play knight h5, queen 1, queen b6, knight 6, queen b8. Yeah, just allowing this. 15 a3 is common. Now we can just take on a3, rook a3, bishop d7. And white still has the issue with the bishop on b3. And yeah, we just want to bring the rook to the queen side. And knight b6, yes, once again, can be met by knight h5. It's an important tactical resource. That I believe is all for the old main line. Yeah, I'm not too impressed. Again, bishop b7 would be a disaster. Queen b6, bishop b3, queen b7. Just then before, yeah, just easy solution. Queen c7 also not that hard, but you don't need to know too much. I don't think this line is that popular these days, but of course it can always happen, especially at an amateur club level. If your opponent prepares according to some old book, for example, where this is a main line. 8 bishop g5, very interesting idea, especially if black is unaware. Leads to fascinating positions. From theoretical point of view, not at all dangerous, but as you will see, quite interesting. The idea is to play queen f3 and castle long. We play bishop b7, queen f3. Once again, this bishop b7, bishop b6 thing is it remains a theme, of course. So here we play queen to c7. Now if white castles long, he can also play e5. Let's look at both. If white castles long, we play knight b7. And now it's important that bishop e6 here doesn't work because of knight to e5. Strong intermezzo. In this particular case, that works out well for black. So because the queen is on f3, we have this resource. Otherwise, of course, taking would be very bad for us. Knight e6, knight g7, knight e5, all that. So knight b7, yes, here it works out. Rook h1, 11, we castle. Queen g3, knight c5. once we get knight to c5, e6 is under firm protection, and we can always take the bishop if needed. Or we can also, of course, we wait until we have to. 11 e5 is principled, but it doesn't quite work. We play bishop b7, of course, as always. That's the point behind queen c7. Queen g3 we take with the knight. Now bishop e6 is there, but these complications don't quite work. We go f e6. If knight e6, we have just queen d7 here, knight g7, king f7. We have very good control over the light squares, so white has nothing here. And if white goes 14 f4, which is the best here, white still gets enough, barely enough for equality. We can play king f7, protecting the e6 pawn. Also bishop c8 was possible, but here after fed, white has to sacrifice with knight e6, and white gets to give a perpetual, but not more. We take on e6, bishop queen h3, king f7, bishop f6 gf, rook d7, queen c6, rook hd1, and now white is just threatening to give perpetual. So, for example, after rook ad8, he wants to go queen h5, king e6, queen h3. We have to comply with the perpetual, but there's nothing more for white at all. So that's for a long castle. But of course, good to know this. I mean, knight d7 already is a hard move. Bishop e6, knight e5 is important. So important to know this line. 10 e5 also very important. Bishop b7, ed6 first, trying to open some files and diagonals in the center. After ed6, we play bishop d6, and now queen e3. White is hinting at some sacrifice on e6, so we have to play bishop c5, pinning the knight. Now white plays long castle, and after knight c6, he has a beautiful move, but not all at the same time. First, let's look at bishop takes f6, g takes f6, and now white has two options: knight e4 or knight d5. All of these complications are fine for black, but black has to be aware of them. Knight e4, we take on d4 with the bishop, also protecting the f6 pawn on the way. Rook d4, queen knight d4 first, sorry. Knight f6, king f8. And after queen takes d4, we have rook d8, queen h4, and now we don't allow any queen h6 checks or knight takes h7 business. We play h6, securing the squares, and our king is very safe on f8. So knight e4, not most dangerous now. Knight d5, we have queen e5, very strong move. Queen takes e5, knight takes e5. After knight c7, king e7, we sacrifice exchange, knight e8. But it's a temporary sack we can take here on g2, rook e1, and here we can take on d4, rook d4, play knight f3. We could also play differently, but bishop d4, rook d4, knight f3 is easiest, picking up the exchange and regaining the material. Bishop f6 gf is not the main trick in this position. Is queen takes e6. That's a beautiful sacrifice that excuse me, I believe Ivanchuk played against Karakin, and this is really spectacular because the queen is sacrificed for just 2 pawns. That is absolutely insane, and it is actually playable for white. Moreover, it's even okay for white. That is already remarkable to me. But yeah, this is the case. Fe knight e6, of course, tremendous knight on e6, queen e7, rook h1, and now like our king is under so much fire here on the e file, and the bishop is there also, and this bishop is also there, and this rook is also there. Our king is totally surrounded by white's pieces, but we have a queen for just 2 pawns, and that means we can give up the queen for just the piece and still be up material. And that's what black should do. Very strong idea to give back the material. Rook e6, knight e7, and now things cool down. It's remarkable how much damage the knight was doing. We had to give up a full queen. And here, white already has to look for equality. He has just 2 pawns for the piece. He can play rook d1. After long castle, bishop f6 gf, he has knight e4, strong move. Bishop e4, rook 1 e4, and he has here enough compensation for the piece. Our pawns are quite soft. And after f5, rook e5, bishop d6, rook e7, white is only exchanged down. After bishop e5, rook e5, rook h8. This endgame led to 3 draws in correspondence chess. The highest rated game was between Perce and Krivic in 2008, a long time ago. They were both over 2,500 rated players. In general, in correspondence chess, of course, if you are 2,500, quality of your games is probably 4,000. It's a very high quality game. yeah, it's a very spectacular idea. I mean, if you play chess for the show, you know, if and want to impress your opponents in the club, then yeah, feel free to play this with white. I mean, objectively, of course, white is barely equalizing at the end, but yeah, if your opponent doesn't know it, it's just a very beautiful idea. Yeah, I think we covered bishop g5 move. Yes, we did. Queen f3. Yeah, queen f3 is the other move order. Here we play bishop b7. There is no bishop e6, so now obviously don't fall for it after castle and play bishop e7, because then it would be bishop e6. Here we, of course, once again avoid it by playing knight b7 first, followed by knight c5, and bishop e6 doesn't work with the bishop on f8 because there is no knight takes g7 in the end of the line after takes. So that's there. Queen f3 is not dangerous now. 8 bishop e3 is the last move we should look at, and here we play bishop e7. It is the most flexible move here. We sometimes want to develop the bishop from c8 to d7 as well, so we keep the flexibility. This is a little bit of a new setup, the bishop e3, bishop b3. White is trying to sort of play the English attack with the bishop on b3, which has its own little different dynamic to the position. White has wasted 2 moves with the bishop, or rather spent 2 moves with the bishop, so black is a little bit faster with his offensive. At the same time, bishop on b3 is, you know, 1 piece closer to the king potentially, so it changes quite a bit. Also, bishop applies pressure on the e6 pawn, changes the dynamic, but all in all, black seems to get very, very good counterplay. After f3, first we castle. Now I look at 3 moves. Queen e2, which was played in Kramnik-Carlsen this year. Kramnik, of course, especially in online rapid, after his announced retirement, is playing much more for the thrill of it. So he just probably played this, took this ginormous risks just to get a fun game, and it was a fun game. Unfortunately for him, Magnus did win eventually. Of course, this is a very risky setup for white. Here, the strongest, or the easiest, is b4. Carlsen played queen c7, knight c6. That's also worked out, but b4 is more direct. Knight a4, bishop d7, and white experiences some issues with the knight on a4, so the long castle idea is no longer possible. So this was the easiest solution here. White can play also a3 first, trying to avoid that, and then we can play bishop d7, g4, knight c6, and g5, knight h5. Typical idea to stop the pawn march. And on the queen side, we want knight a5, knight a5, knight c4, rook to c8 or b8, depending on circumstances. Just pretty good play for black, standard Sicilian play on the queen side. After queen d2, also recommend bishop d7. I like this move here. The point is that we might want to push b4, but knight a4 is going to be badly placed because of queen a5 ideas. Of course, after long castle, I mean. So here long castle b4, knight a4, queen a5, and knight ce2 is just as bad because of a5, a4, where exactly here bishop is disastrous on b3, just comes under tempi. So long castle is terrible. G4 instead is what I look at, and now we play knight c6. Also, we can play b4, but knight c6 works out well. If white castles long here, it's also not good. We take queen d4, queen d4, again a5. The bishop on b3 is terrible, and our bishop on d7 is protecting the d5 pawn. So here black is doing very well. After 12 g5, we also take knight d4, queen d4, and now knight h5. And next we're going to play a5. White hasn't achieved anything here, and he, if anything, regrets the placing his bishop here on b3. Instead of f3, white can also try queen e2. Possibly Kramnik had the move order confused, but probably he was just going for creative play. Again, see, if black somewhere plays it a little bit too simple, if he would play like bishop to b7, then already all these complications are no longer so easy for black, because after b4 there is always an knight a4 option. So it only looks so good for black if black is on it, and after f3 castle, queen e2 plays b4, bishop d7, very accurate. After queen d2, also bishop d7. and then knight c6. So black has to play a little bit accurately at the start. But if he does, and if he avoids all the tricks, with all bishop takes c6 tricks and also this, then of course white is taking quite some risks. Let's look at knight queen e2. In fact, both Dubov and Kramnik started with this move. This was their move order. And castle, and yeah, it was here that Kramnik played this f3 and landed in that same position. That wasn't good. Instead, if you go to long castle, it's again bad because of b4, knight a4, and now we don't take the pawn on e4, but we can just play queen a5, and the knight on a4 is in a great deal of trouble. And after a short castle, move 9, 10 a3 is probably the most testing. f3, once again, it transposes to this game of Kramnik where we go b4. So 10 a3. Yeah, now I recommend bishop b7. The reason I don't recommend bishop d7 here is very simple. Without white having played f3 yet, this would come in a worse version, because white would push g4, g5 instantly, and bishop on d7 does not provoke the f3 move at all, so that was kind of losing some time. So here I do recommend bishop b7, forcing the move f3. But it's also possible to play queen c7, knight c6. That was a plan that Carlsen played, also possible idea. Bishop b7 I like, f3, now knight c6. So again, to highlight, so after f3 here, we do go for bishop d7 plans with b4, bishop d7, and if white has started with f3, castle a3, then again we go for bishop d7, because the pawn is already on f3, but if the pawn is not yet on f3 after a3, we go bishop b7 to provoke the move f3. And now knight c6, now knight c6, bishop c6, again very good for black. We can play queen b8, followed by b4 immediately or after a5. And long castle is more principled, and now we play knight a5. There are also other ideas. Obviously, we can try to play rook b8 or queen b8 and then go for b4 ideas, but knight a5 works pretty well. The thing is always, when the queen is on e2 and knight is on c3, in such positions after rook c8, we threaten to sack on c3 and double white's horrible pawns. g4, rook c8, king b1. We can sacrifice right away, but we can also play knight d7. I like this flexible move. And now after h4, because if white tries to avoid this with bishop d2 or I don't know, queen e1 or so, we get even more time. We bring the knight via e5 over to c4. And if white does allow sacrifice, then we take on c3, bc3, and knight b6. We have both knights coming to the c4 square. Of course, here white has the bishop on b3, so he's trying to cement a little bit his weak pawn structure. But we have both knights aiming for the c4 square, and that is one knight too many for white. And after knight coming to c4, already all kinds of attacking ideas are there. And white, in his turn, is still very far on the king side, and our king is pretty safe. So I believe this does it all pretty logical. I think main takeaway here is the various move orders. So start with e6, bishop b3, b5, not bishop e7, not allowing g4. Then after bishop e3, bishop e7. Yeah, here again, it's, the move order trickery after a3, bishop b7. Slightly, perhaps, confusing and slightly challenging, but the rewards are high in the bishop c4 system if you do get your move orders right and eventually get your pieces out in the perfect way. Then in the long run, white is struggling with the bishop on b3, and the more games I saw, the more positions I analyzed, the more I found the system to be rather risky for white. I think that sums up all of the bishop c4 system. I think we looked at all the options. So I think all is clear. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next chapter.